talk about estimating quotients. Remember, estimating means that we get to use rounding in order to make arithmetic easier for us. So let's take a look at this scenario. The observation deck of the Willis Tower in Chicago, Illinois is 1,353 feet above the ground. Elevators lift visitors to that level in 60 seconds. So think about that. So it's 1,353 feet above the ground. That's a lot. Like, that's crazy, crazy tall, right? It's like a skyscraper. So when it says that elevators can lift visitors all the way up to the top level in just 60 seconds, or we could say 1 minute, right? So the question says about. I love that word about. It makes me feel super good because I know that I'm in for some easy math when I says about, because I get to use rounding. About how many feet do the elevators travel per second? Per second. So whenever we're thinking about breaking something down into per second, that's always going to be a little bit of a division problem, okay? So when we think about solving this problem, I can actually use rounding for easy math. I can actually use rounding for easy math to be able to solve this problem. So for example, I have 1,353. 1,353. And I get to round that. Now here's a secret. Remember how I told you that rounding and estimating should make your mathematics easier? Well, I can round this to an easy number that's easy for me to use. So I know that my original problem would be, 1,353 divided by 60, right? So I get to make some decisions here because it tells me about. I can round this to a number that is easier and also more compatible with 60. Now, technically this would round, if I were doing it to the nearest hundred, it would round to 1,400 or 1,400. But here's the cool thing. I can actually round it to the nearest number that is easiest for me to use that is also compatible with my divisor. So in this case, I can choose to round this number. And I can do that because it says about, okay? I can round that number to 1,200. And I already know what you're saying. Ms. Knack, why are you doing that? 1,353, that would round to 1,400. I agree. But because it says we get to estimate, we want to pick a number that's also compatible with 60. Okay? So now we're going to be able to use an easier division problem, which would be 1,200 divided by 60. Here's the beautiful part, guys. I don't even have to set this up as a division problem in the division bracket. Okay? I can kind of use what I know. And I already know some basic facts, okay? I already know that 12 divided by 6 equals 2. Well, if I already know that 12 divided by 6 equals 2, let's say I bumped it up to this. If I know that 12 divided by 6 is 2, if I add a 0 to both sides, 120 divided by 60, guess what that equals? If you said 2, you are correct. You're absolutely correct. So, what if I have 1,200 divided by 60? Well, if you remember back to trailing zeros, right? When we go backwards and we multiply, we end up getting more zeros, right? So if I went backwards like this, 2 times 60, that means that I'm just going to get 2 times 12 with 1 0. That's where I get 120 from. Here, I would just have to bump it up by 1 0, right? bump it up by 1 0 because 20 times 60 would give me 1200. So there we go. Our rounded estimate quotient would be 20 per second, 20 feet per second. So the quotient would end up being the elevators travel about. Now, it's very important for me to use the word about because we did round and we did estimate. About 20 feet per second. That's pretty nice, isn't it? I love doing math like that because it makes life a little bit easier also, doesn't it? Okay. So let's just think about this for a second. What if we were going to do another one? So let's just say that we were going to do, let's just use another example. Let's say we were going to do 154 divided by 22, okay? And let's just say that whatever the problem was, it says that we got to estimate, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my two numbers and I'm going to round those numbers so that I can have some easy math. So I see that I have 22 and I see that I have 154. Well, I know that 22 and 154 aren't very compatible with each other, but you know what is? 40 and 20 are compatible. So could I round this to be 140 divided by 20? You bet I could. And because I already know my multiplication facts, I already know that 2 times 7 equals 14. Well, if I had 20 times 7, that would be 140. So guess what, boys and girls? Our estimated quotient for this particular problem would be 7. Now, the good thing about this is this helps us to know that if we estimate and get an estimated quotient, that helps us also to know that if our real answer, like if I were to really do this problem, it also helps us to know if our answer is reasonable, okay? So if I were to really do that real math, if I were to say, if I were to actually work out, let's just say that I were actually to work out 154 divided by 22, okay? Let's just say that I decided to do that. We're going to use our estimated product or our estimated quotient to check to see if our real answer is somewhat reasonable. Okay, so I know that 22 is not going to go into 0 or into 1. It'll go 0 times, and it'll go into 15 0 times because 15 is smaller. So I'm stuck with trying to put 22 into 154. Okay, so I already know that 7 times 20 is 140. So I can go a little bit bigger, can't I? So let's just say I did, so 22 times 7, all right? So 2 times 7 is 14, and again, 2 times 7 is 14 plus 1 is 15. Uh-oh, look at that, guys. So 22 times 7 is 154. So it just so happens that my estimated quotient is exactly the same as my real quotient. That almost never happens, so that's kind of cool that it worked out that way with the way that we ended up doing our estimating. But we ended up using compatible numbers, so we ended up actually kind of using the same difference, if that makes any sense. So I hope that you, in the future, will use a little bit of estimating to check to see if your real answer is somewhat compatible or somewhat reasonable. In this case, it just worked out beautifully. But in some cases, you won't always get the same exact quotient as what your estimated quotient is, but it just helps give you a guide. Okay.